Councillor Wheeler, you're now live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. I thought I'd never get famous enough to be on YouTube. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for tonight's Community Scrutiny Group meeting. It's April 29th. The last meeting was on 28th of January, and I hear there's been a show called Line of Duties that's been released to trying to take our viewing figures, but I'm sure we'll take top spot back tonight in what's probably going to be our last full meeting on YouTube anyway before the legislation changes again. So with tonight's meeting, with me tonight, the Executive Manager for Neighbourhood, Dave Banks, also the Deputy Chief Executive. We've got Emma Giorgio, who's Team Manager of Environment. Welcome, Emma. We've got Helen Tambrini and Laura Webb from Democratic Services. And I don't believe I missed anyone out from the officer team, or someone will shout at me from there. No, that's great. In terms of councillors with us this evening, we've got Councillor Belle Bansal, who's the Vice Chairman. We've got Councillor Richard Mallender, Councillor Rod Jones, Councillor David Sims, Councillor Leo Healy, Councillor Rex Walker, Councillor Gareth Williams, and we've got Councillor Gary Dickman, who is here, just his video's off at the moment just due to connection issues, but is here and raring to go with us. So welcome everyone this evening, and to everyone who's watching at home on YouTube. So before we begin with the formal business, we're just going to hand over to Dave Banks, who's just going to give a short introduction, because obviously this meeting is under PERDA because of the upcoming county council elections. So Dave, just going to explain to people at home why we're potentially going to be not in full political speak mode, and also just remind councillors what the legislation is while we're in this PERDA period. So over to Dave, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So yeah, this is just a quick reminder to say that obviously during this pre-election period, please be mindful that during meetings that you should remain politically impartial and avoid making reference to anything that could be seen as unfairly promoting one political agenda over another. So I just wanted to make that point, and thank you very much for your support and cooperation this evening.
Thank you very much, Dave. And obviously in a slight difference this meeting, we're effectively co-chairing. So if Dave does believe that we are going into the realms of politicalness, I'm sure he will intervene and just make the point clear again, but I'm sure we won't get to that point. Councillor Mallender, so you've got your hand up.
Yes, Chair. With that in mind, do you need anybody to declare if they're a candidate or anything like that?
I don't believe so, unless Dave, you believe we should do just no.
No.
Okay, that's great. No, thanks for asking, Richard. Great point to bring up. So, again, before we go into the formal meeting, what I would like to do, obviously we've had the really sad news of Dave Mitchell, one of the executive managers with Harrop Rushcliffe, the executive manager for communities. And although he wasn't involved with this community scrutiny group, the amount of work that Dave's done over 30 years for the community of Rushcliffe is immense, and his loss is going to be felt, of course, by all officers, by councillors, and by the entire community and everyone who's known him. So I know at full council we have a chance to speak about Dave and to remember him there, but what I'd very much like to do with everyone's indulgence, just have a minute silence in memory of Dave, and obviously so we can pass on our best to Dave and his entire family. So just going to have a minute silence, which I'll start now and let you know when we're going to finish. So the silence will start now. Thank you. And that's the minute. Thank you very much, everyone. So on to the formal business of this evening, and on to item 1, which is declaration of interest. So has anyone got any declaration of interest? Councillor Jones? As of the next item, okay, no problem. So item 2, minutes of the meeting, and I've got a suspicion Councillor Jones' hand is up for that one. So Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just a query on page 2 at the next to the bottom paragraph. where it talks about the executive manager, and at the end it says other leisure options had been considered but were not considered affordable. And my understanding was that it was other leisure options had been considered by the study, and some of us challenged whether that was a wide enough range of leisure activities. So I just think the way it reads, it means every other possibility had been dismissed.
Okay, no, yeah, I'm just rereading it now. So other leisure options have been considered. Yeah, at the same point, I think although we might know what it means, I can understand that perhaps people are reading it who perhaps weren't present or reading it may not. Okay.
They might think it's, well, every other possibility, but a number of us floated other possibilities, but obviously that wasn't part of the study. And I think the comments were made about other leisure options had been considered by the study, basically, or the consultant, whichever.
Okay, so did you have an amendment you want to propose, Councillor Jones, or something you just want to think on and see how we get that to?
Other leisure options had been considered by the consultant, but were not considered affordable.
Okay, anyone else got any comments? Anyone happy with that amendment Councillor Jones has put forward? Not seeing anyone against, so no, I agree with that, Councillor Jones. If everyone's okay with that amendment, that we will go to adopt those minutes unless anyone else has got a query on another part of the minutes at all. Not seeing anything, so unless anyone says against, going to take that we're going to adopt those minutes with the amendment from Councillor Jones. So thank you, Councillor Jones, for raising that. So on to item 3, which is the substantial business for this evening, which is the carbon management plan. So going to first of all hand over to Dave for a short introduction before we welcome Emma to take us through the report. Dave.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a relatively short report, which just sort of summarises and reminds councillors about some of the background to this important stream of work that we're developing. Members will be aware that the council adopted a climate change action plan not so long ago and tasked Community Scrutiny Group with the job of scrutinising it on an annual basis. And so what this report does is sort of seek to provide a quick update around the various work streams. And as 4.3 states there were 67 actions in this first version of the carbon management plan, and considerable work has been carried out. However, I think that's despite obviously the global pandemic, which of course has prioritised much officer resource during the last sort of 12 months. What we have also been doing, though, is developing a rather nice dashboard, which is incorporated in Appendix 1, which is really gives you a simple sort of snapshot, if you like, in terms of the progress that we're making with our carbon reduction commitments. And you can see where we are in terms of our journey towards becoming, hopefully, net zero by 2030. And at the bottom there's some highlights that we've picked out. The purpose of this dashboard is really just to provide that quick snapshot that we can then share on a regular basis, not just at Scrutiny, but also with wider members and indeed potentially the members of the public as well on a regular basis, so that there's a great deal of transparency about where we are on our journey. So I think it's probably appropriate now just to hand over to Emma Georgiou, who's got a presentation that's going to walk you through the various sort of progress that we've made over the last 12 months. And we really welcome members' comments and observations about the actions that have been achieved, but also it gives you a glimpse, if you like, of the actions that we're proposing for 21-22. And again, we welcome members' observations about those actions and our commitments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dave, and welcome to Emma. And the floor is yours, or the virtual floor at least.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Yes, lovely. So my name's Emma Georgiou. I'm the team manager for environment. Came into post in December. So the presentation outline today will cover a number of topics. So I'll give a brief understanding of sort of greenhouse gas emissions and their impact on the climate. I'll explain about the different carbon scopes and what they mean. I'll talk about how Rushcliffe Borough Council is performing, progress to date, emerging opportunities and priorities for 21-22. So before I get into the report proper, I thought I would give an overview of what's happening. As you are all aware, the world is getting warmer, and in 2019 was Europe's warmest one on record. Now, this temperature can be attributed to the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and this arises from human activities such as heating our homes, buying goods and services, and travel. Now, there are 6 main greenhouse gases as set out in the Kyoto Protocol Agreement, and they're shown here on the slide. Now, all of these have negative impacts, and they warm our climate, creating a greenhouse effect. Now, they act like a blanket, which warms the atmosphere and causes frequent and extreme weather events. Now, different gases have different effects on the Earth's warming, and I have ranked them on the slide according to the impact, with the worst probably at the bottom. So though emissions are comprised of several greenhouse gases, for reporting purposes, they are turned into a common unit of CO2e, so and are generally referred to as carbon emissions. So why are we reducing our carbon emissions? So this is obviously so we can mitigate our impact on the climate. UK has a legally binding target to cut its greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. And obviously just coming out this week is the UK have agreed to cut emissions by 78% by 2035. We've got the Paris Agreement, which is a legally binding international treaty, and its goal is to limit global climate temperature rise to below 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, this is in fact to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change, and it's now agreed that anything above this is going to be irreversible. Obviously, we've got alignment to Rushcliffe Borough Council's corporate strategy and our climate change strategy, and we all need to play our part, because tackling this is not an option. On our own is not an option. So what's Rushcliffe Borough Council's commitment? Well, in March 2020, you made a commitment to work towards becoming carbon neutral by 2030 for your own operations. And what does carbon neutrality mean? Well, it means achieving an overall balance between the emissions emitted and those that are removed out of the atmosphere. What are other Nottinghamshire districts doing? Well, the majority of Nottinghamshire districts have or will be making their own commitment to be working towards becoming carbon neutral. And I've shown these on the screen here, on the slide here. So let's talk about carbon scopes to give you an idea of carbon reporting. And I'll go into detail in a few slides later on. So greenhouse gas emissions are categorised into 3 groups. So we have scope 1. Now, this is all direct emissions for activities under our control, so Rushcliffe Borough Council's control. Now, this includes things like fuel combustion on site, such as gas boilers, and then we have the fuel for the fleet vehicles, and we have things like capturing things like air conditioning leaks. For scope 2, we have indirect emissions, and this comes from the electricity purchased by Rushcliffe. And these are the emissions generated by the production and eventually used by Rushcliffe. Now, scopes 1 and 2 are generally reported together. With scope 3, this is all other indirect emissions. Now, this is from activities that we do not own or control, but come under our influence. Now, these are generally the greatest share of carbon footprint and cover things associated with business travel, procurement, so that's our supply chain, waste, water, commuting, our leased properties, and even staff working from home during the current pandemic will all fall under scope 3. So let's go into a bit more detail on the scopes. So scope 1, as I said, was direct emissions. So the way here is it's really important that we need to look at ways to firstly improve the energy efficiency of our buildings. First, by looking at retrofitting our existing stock, And secondly, by ensuring that any construction of new properties or new builds produce little or no emissions. We need to decarbonise our gas boiler systems and replace them with things such as air source heat pumps. But to do that and to gain maximum efficiency, we need to make sure that the insulation of our buildings has been addressed first. We need to look at decarbonising our fleet. Now, in the shorter term, that means making sure that the journeys that fleet makes are absolutely essential, making sure that journeys are as optimised as they can be. But in the medium and longer term, this means looking at replacing the fleet with electric or even hydrogen fuel vehicles. Getting this reduction right won't happen overnight. Now, whilst it would be great to move to this technology now, as you can all appreciate, there is a cost attributed to this. So one way to make very simple changes is just to use less, because these small changes will add up to a big difference. So Scope 2 emissions. Now, these are indirect emissions come from the electricity that we use. Now, Rushcliffe Borough Council are currently looking to replace their energy tariff with a 100% renewable one. And this will hopefully be in place by the late spring, early summer. But as with Scope 1, it's all about limiting our usage and making sure that simple as things such as turning your monitor off at night, it's all about using less. Scope 3. Now, these are the ones that are most difficult to quantify, but the ones that have the biggest effect. Now, since 2008-9, there have been some monitoring of these emissions, but not all of them. Now, some of these are shown on this graph here. So those highlighted in blue are our Scope 3, and those in green are our Scopes 1 and 2. And as you can see, if you totaled all these together, Scope 3 contributes to 63% of Rushcliffe Borough Council's carbon emissions. So that's fairly significant, and we haven't captured them all. And I'm currently working on building a more accurate picture on those. So our progress. We've been making really good progress. So since 2008-9, Rushcliffe Borough Council have reduced their carbon emissions by 40%. So to keep carbon reporting consistent, I will continue to use the headers since 2008-9 to create that clear baseline picture. But I do, however, hope to include more detail with the Scope 3. And I know many organisations are currently looking into this at the moment. And what I want you to be aware of is with regards to Scope 3, it might actually make our carbon emissions look worse, or we're going backwards, when in fact we're actually capturing a much clearer picture and giving us a much stronger baseline from which to move forward. The data I have is not completely up to date. It's up to 2018-19, and that's the most comprehensive data we have at the moment. And I'm currently working on the 1920-2021 data. But as you can see from the trend line, we are heading in the right direction. And this is before we see the impact of any carbon reduction measures. So really good. But what we do have to work on and have to see is, whilst we have these carbon reduction measures, we also have to incorporate the value of offset to make sure that we achieve carbon neutrality. So that means making sure that we're planting plenty of trees and the right kind of trees, because things like oak and pine are really good at capturing that carbon. And we need to make sure that we're maintaining and enhancing our natural environment. So what have our barriers been to our progress? Well, obviously, the current pandemic has had an impact on the carbon management plan, both in terms of leadership and the operation and delivery. Obviously, on the 10th of March 2020, the Cabinet signed off on the report, and on the 23rd of March, we went into lockdown. My post was delayed as a consequence because it was due to go out in April, and I didn't come into post until December. But we've made really positive progress. Other barriers are such as tight deadlines for funding applications, because obviously there's a swathe of funding for projects, decarbonisation projects, which is brilliant, but it's making sure that we have those projects ready to go off the shelf. So when this funding becomes available, we can react very quickly, and this is something we're looking to address at the moment. We have obviously got delivery of funding allocations, so we have the LAD 2. And this is for delivery of energy efficiency measures in the borough. And this funding is across all of the Midlands, and the timeline for delivery is being incredibly tight. We have to deliver this project by the end of December. And obviously, in terms of your carbon management plan, the key area of focus is obviously your scopes 1 and 2. But this project is sort of taking up a bit of office time with regards to its delivery, and taking away a little bit of that focus. Obviously, the other thing in terms of barrier is resources. And by that, I mean staffing. There's a big challenge with regards to the carbon management plan, and that's one that requires action and resource. So the progress on the carbon management plan. So obviously, since I started, I've created a carbon dashboard that sort of is a very easy way of looking at our progress, and hopefully making things very transparent for members, residents. There are 67 actions identified in version 1 of the carbon management plan, and these cover 8 key themes, both internal and influencing actions. I'm currently looking at updating the plan, and this will hopefully be completed by the summer with a version 2, and we're identifying with staff key and new actions going forward. As you can see, there has been great progress. Now, I think there's approximately 13 actions not started, and that in general has been down to COVID. We've got 50 in progress, 4 completed, and I have identified with staff about 16 new actions. So we are making good progress. But as you can appreciate, the plan is a long-term one, it's 10 years, and the actions of this will sort of ebb and flow as we go along. Progress to date. Obviously, great progress with EV charging. We've got a couple of live sites at Rushcliffe Arena and Keyworth, and by the end of May we will have further sites at Radcliffe-on-Trent and another at Keyworth. In October and November we will have a further, hopefully the first solar canopy site at Gamston, and by the end of the year we have a further 3 sites planned. Funding is currently being sought for those, one at West Bridgeford, one at Gresham and one at Rushcliffe Country Park. We've been successful with £100,000 worth of Salix funding, which will enable delivery of LED lighting upgrades across the Rushcliffe Borough Council estate, and that's for 8 of our properties. And then we have Chapel Bingham Lane, and we have £367,000 worth of carbon reduction technology, and the offices there are being built to BREEAM Very Good. And the kind of measures that are going in there sort of are things like air source heat pumps, solar thermal, heat recovery units in the office. We're looking at LED lighting, combined heat and power source, water reduction methods as well. Other actions. So we obviously have the £1 million Climate Action Reserve Fund set up. We've got a development of the comprehensive Carbon Clever brand, a 2-pronged approach, one which will deliver comms on Rushcliffe Borough Council's actions to date in terms of working towards becoming carbon neutral, but the other will focus on residents and key behaviour change with those and nudging that carbon behaviour. We've delivered 3,808 trees to Rushcliffe Borough Council via the Free Tree Scheme, and that's also been via the Parish Councils. And we have this week just confirmed that we have delivered over 90 kilograms of wildflower seeds to our parish and town councils. So we're looking forward to seeing those results later on in the year, which will be fantastic. Other progress. So obviously we've got the inclusion of the carbon reduction technology to our cremator. So we've got an electric cremator, which will be only one of a handful in the country, which is fantastic. Yesterday we had the Big Business Club, the start of the very first meeting, which was really successful. We had 6 big businesses from Rushcliffe within the borough of Rushcliffe come together with the University of Nottingham. The aims of the group are to act as champions of low carbon in Rushcliffe, and to share and support other businesses in the borough. From that first meeting, we were able to capture some real key topics, and sort of gathered some collaboration going forward, and we hope to expand on this going forward. We also have the Cycle to Work scheme for members of staff. The limit on bikes was previously set at £1,000, but it was recognised that some staff were interested in electric bikes, and obviously the cost of these is usually higher. And therefore, Rushcliffe increased the cap to £2,000, which gave everybody the opportunity to apply for an electric bike. And I think HR have confirmed that somebody has done that this month. The scheme of the window closes tomorrow, but we hope to offer the scheme back up later in the year, as there's been some feedback that due to the pandemic, there has been some restrictions on the bikes. So what's members' role? What can you do? Well, obviously you can act as champions for the carbon reduction agenda. You could also help to identify opportunities for carbon reduction and make officers aware so that we can capture this information and look at ways forward. But also it's to be carbon clever and think about the impact that you have on your own carbon impacts. You know, could you walk instead of drive? Could you turn off lights? Could you shut down your computer at night? All those kind of add up to a big difference. So what are the emerging opportunities? Well, we're currently working with other Nottinghamshire districts on a resident engagement platform to capture carbon avoidance emissions for our residents. We've obviously got COP26, so that's the UK, the climate change conference. Now that will be held in the UK in Glasgow at the beginning of November, and we hope to have some comms and activities around that time. We've obviously got the LAD retrofit project, which is energy efficiency measures for our residents. We are also looking at developing shovel-ready or shelf-ready projects for when funding applications or funding becomes available. I've started to deliver carbon workshop, light carbon workshop for staff and for members, and we're also looking at delivering a carbon literacy workshop, a full-day one, with anybody that's interested. And we're also looking at working in partnership with parishes, towns, councils, etc. And we're looking at attending the parish forum or conference in June and hopefully later on in the year. And that's by working together to mitigate those impacts of climate change. So what are our priorities for 21-22? Well, realistically, there needs to be focus on your scopes 1 and 2 emissions. We need to establish a comprehensive baseline for carbon, including scope 3, and there needs to be creation of a carbon roadmap to 2030. Covering the scopes 1 and 2, we need to carry out an energy audit of all Rushcliffe Borough Council estate and establish the retrofit requirements for those buildings. We need to look at the decarbonisation of the fleet. We need to look at a development of a comprehensive tree planting plan. And then on top of that, we're looking at the Rushcliffe Country Park redevelopment and that becoming an exemplar site for carbon management. And we're using that as an example for the rest of the estate. So that will be very much a learning opportunity for how we can roll out measures across the rest of the Rushcliffe Borough Council estate. And the other thing, other action, is to refresh the climate change strategy. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much for that, Emma. So I'm sure there'll be a few questions. Councillor Jones, I thought that hand's been up since the last item, but or have you stuck your hand up again? Oh, Councillor Manager.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Emma, and welcome to the Borough Council. It looks like you've been doing a vast amount of work, so thank you for that. Yes, this is really positive. It looks really good. I have got a few questions. I've been scribbling away here. Okay. There's lots of really positive things there, like the electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles for refuse. That's really good. The replacing gas boilers with air source heat pumps. Okay. So the LAD 2 funding, firstly, you said that's available across the Midlands. Is that East Midlands or West Midlands or the whole Midlands together?
The whole Midlands. It's an allocation, and all Nottinghamshire districts have accepted that allocation, and it's to obviously promote or get it's for green recovery, should I say, and it's about getting energy measures for those properties that are in E, F, and G rated properties, and it's for owner occupiers. So we're looking at currently an area in Eastleigh to start off with, because obviously the more concentrated an area, it's easier to deliver such a project. But it may be that we look at other areas across the borough as well.
That's fantastic, thank you.
Chair.
I understood that also a few of things from the scope 3, as we learn to sort of get a better idea of what that includes and what our emissions are, it might make our emissions go up a bit or sort of jump up slightly, just as we sort of learn more about how to measure that. Is that correct?
Dave, are you all right if I take that?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. With regard to scope 3, yes. Obviously, Rushcliffe have made a commitment for your scopes 1 and 2, but with regards to scope 3, there is some understanding of that, but scopes 3, as we get a better understanding, will increase, because obviously we haven't captured anything for supply chain, and that will be the biggest contributor. So when you look at scope 3, on average, and I'm generalizing, your supply chain will contribute to approximately 60% of your scope 3 emissions, and we haven't got an understanding of that yet.
Could I ask, does that scope 3 also include things such as when we've been sort of outsourcing, so we're lots of people using cloud computing, like we're using Zoom at the moment and so on, so we're not traveling, but there's a carbon cost to that as well, like there's a cost to the servers just because they're maybe half a planet away. So is that covered in scope 3 as well?
Yes, everything like that's not under our direct control or influence, but will affect our activities, comes under scope 3. But there's 15 key, there's a tool that we can use for reporting, and there's 15 headers within that we use for reporting. Okay,
and one last one, if I may, Chair. I've got a lot written down, but one last one was about residents' understanding of it. Now, I've come across a few people, not locally, I have to say, but I have come across a few people who think that because their councils are going carbon neutral, that's it, they don't have to do anything. The council's going to sort it all out. And I was wondering, is getting the residents to understand what the council's doing, does that include also making sure that they still understand that they have to do things as well?
With regards to the comms plan, we've got a comprehensive comms plan, and there are 2 prongs on that comms plan. So one, we'll talk about Rushcliffe Borough Council's carbon neutral activities and the progress that we're making. But the other prong of that is about promoting behaviour change and getting residents to understand that they also will need to undertake those activities, and it's about nudging that behaviour, and they will be aware of that. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Mander. Next up was Councillor Bansal.
Thank you, Chair. That was a great presentation. I enjoyed that. I just wanted to say that. And what I really did like is the dashboard you've generated. I think it's very good, very clear, very concise, some really good information. And I think just visually the graphs are fantastic. Just a question on that. I've got 2 or 3 questions. Just a question on that. I know you said you're working on 18-19 data. When do you think you'll have the 19-20 data ready by?
I'm hoping we're still gathering a few sources, because obviously we've had a bit of a delay with COVID. I'd like to say within the next 2 months. I'd like to have a picture of that to be able to put that out sooner, hopefully. But I don't want to sort of definitely commit to anything.
Okay, that's good. I'm guessing once that's done, you'd be able to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the joy of this dashboard, is immediately this goes into the dashboard, I can share that straight away.
Fabulous. There's a number of electric vehicle charging points that have been installed, which is really, really good. Have you got any data on how many residents, how many cars are using it, and the kind of the correlation between a reduction in the carbon emissions and electric cars being charged at our car parks?
I have got some data. I haven't got it to hand at the moment, but I can come back to you with that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I was just wondering if we had that data. So yeah, if you've got it.
In terms of number of electric vehicles and things, in terms of reduction in carbon emissions, I don't know. That's something I can have a look into. Okay,
super. And then obviously for us councillors, we want to help this as well, right? We want to reduce our own carbon emissions, etc. So I know Councillor Moore's often said he's got an electric vehicle and he's helping. Things like that, are they helping the overall bringing down carbon emissions?
Anything like that, as I said, it's even the small, the small actions that you take, anything that you do like that, turning off your lights, turning your laptop off at night, anything like that, electric vehicle, it will all help. Please don't think that even the smallest thing won't make a difference, because it will. So things like that is absolutely fantastic. And to have an electric vehicle is great, because, quite a significant outlay in terms of that. Yeah. And that's a great commitment going forward.
That's great. So I don't know if Councillor Moore's watching on YouTube, but well done on that one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bounce. So you've made his night now, called out Councillor Moore for YouTube. That'll be it. He'll be crowing for the next 6 months on that one. So I don't know whether to thank you for that or not, but thank you for that, for your contribution. Councillor Sims.
Thanks, Chair. Going to practical things, I'm building my own house at the moment, and I'm very keen on doing it in the most ecological way. And I've been looking into various things to heat the house, and I've discovered that air source heat pumps are not the utopia we seem to think they are, because they use massive amounts of electricity, and they're only really that efficient up till 5 degrees. We mentioned air source heat pumps. One thing that I don't want the council to do, and to be recommending to people, is air source heat pumps without actually getting a balance on. I don't want to put people into fuel poverty for a start, because they do use a lot of electricity. And I don't want the council to invest really heavily in this stuff and then not, the resources to pay for that electricity outweighs the benefit of those things. So I think it's really important that we do a cost benefit analysis to see if the benefit of the carbon reduction actually balances up. And we need to have a multi-pronged approach to this, with heat exchange systems, thermal, the new heat plate systems can heat instead of air source heat pumps. Very efficient, and they'll be efficient down to -15. So all these things, what I'm trying to say is we're all running forward to try and get this done in the best possible way, with the best intentions, but we could be ending up with this albatross. And certainly from my research, I don't want to end up with an albatross that I've got to pay for lots and lots of electricity that's being produced even now by coal. So it's just what I'm trying to get over is, can we not just have tunnel vision? Can we open the vision up? We want to achieve this, but it might not be the way we think it needs to be achieved. It might be another way. So there you go. There's my statement, really, and question.
Dave, are you all right if I?
Yeah.
So in terms of that I totally agree. That I was talking about Rushcliffe Country Park and that being the exemplar site. That's where our learning is going to be. Obviously, we are working with Nottingham City in terms of they're looking at our energy efficiency measures. We're not just going to consider an option, say air source heat pumps, and then just go with that, there is obviously going to be a big business case about what's going to work best for us, what's going to work best for the building. Because obviously with regards to any building, when you're looking at energy efficiency, the first thing you're going to look at is insulation, and making sure that your insulation is top notch. So that's your walls, your floor, your ceiling. So making sure that that's all first, and then you will look at how you're going to heat that building. So we would obviously be looking at any sort of business case, and I want to sort of lay any fears that we will be looking at that going forward. And this is where we're taking our learning from Rushcliffe Country Park and then taking that forward across the rest of the estate.
I think heat exchange is a massive one that we should be looking at. It might be more costly and disruptive in the first instance, but I think in the long term, heat exchange has real good benefits. And the other thing is battery technology. Batteries really are a here and now. They don't last long. Certainly if you buy a Nissan, you lease the batteries because they're not that keen on them lasting a long time. So I think really to go down the hydrogen route would possibly be more future-proof than battery, because batteries are here and now. But I think hydrogen, I think that's got to be the way we've got to go, because we can't afford to have refuse collection and then change the batteries after 5 years, because it would be such a massive expense to the council taxpayer of Rushcliffe.
I think it's just a case of working out a business case, and that is all being looked at the moment, isn't it, Dave, in terms of hydrogen and electric?
Absolutely, Emma. Yeah, and if we can just perhaps come in there, Chair. So in terms of our own operations and our own assets and buildings, as always, as you'd expect, we carry out a full sort of business appraisal in terms of any technology we'd want to adopt to make sure that the numbers stack up, because we know that our colleagues in finance will be making sure that that's the case. However, in terms of what we want to promote to residents and the wider public, I think it's important that we sort of almost take a really neutral view and sort of say, look, there's all this different range of technology out there. Try and provide advice and information and support, and as you say, help people make those choices, because it's changing all the time in terms of what technology is available, what's actually the next best thing. We had a fascinating presentation just recently about how there are pilots around introducing, hydrogen into the gas mains, and how there's going to be potentially a blended approach. Clearly, something like that's got to come into play to deal with all the number of existing gas boilers that are going to need retrofitting when that's sort of phased out. I think it's 2025, so it's pretty close actually when you look at it. And in terms of vehicles, we've been loaning a number of electric vehicles, sort of panel vans, that kind of thing, to test them out, see what works for us. How does that compare to our mileage? And importantly as well, what infrastructure do we actually need to create to help them operate? And I think that's the crucial thing, as you mentioned at the moment, about HGVs and the potential switch to hydrogen, is what infrastructure do we need to have in place at a strategic level, not just us, but potentially working across the conurbation and Greater Nottingham to make sure that we can actually attract a hydrogen production at scale, which is what's needed. So it's a fascinating topic, and the important thing is that we're plugged into all the right people and all the right groups via our environmental strategy group and Midlands Energy Hub to make sure we are at the centre, if you like, in terms of the development of some of those technologies and the infrastructure that's needed to support them.
Thank you
very much, and thanks for that contribution, Councillor Sims. It was very interesting. Councillor Walker.
Thanks, Chair. Happy to defer to Councillor Jones, who I think was before me.
Okay, thank you. Brexit, I saw your hand jump up first, but Councillor Jones.
Oh. It doesn't really matter what order we're in, but yes, thanks very much, Emma, for an enthusiastic presentation, and you've clearly got your feet under the table well and truly. A number of points. Firstly, the general one, I think especially when we're communicating with the public, we should be also emphasising that the warming of the earth is creating much more arid areas, and that leads to migration of people who are desperate to live in areas that are more habitable. So there are much bigger consequences, more immediate ones, some quite immediate ones from climate change. A couple of questions. One is, what's a solar canopy? What's it mean? What's its consequence? When you referred to the wildflower seeds to town and parish councils, did that include the West Bridgeford Local Area Forum? And does Scope 3 include all the private leisure centres as well as the ones that the council owns? Thank you, Chair.
That's Councillor Jones. Was it Emma?
So with regards to, sorry, the first question was, sorry, can you?
Solar canopy.
So solar canopy, yes, sorry, yeah, is a canopy really with PV panels on it that you can use to charge your car. So in essence, we have got some drawings that we can share, I think, Dave. Not now, but we can always circulate those. With regards to the wildflower seeds, sorry, can you remind me of the question again?
It was West Bridgeford Local Area Forum.
Oh yes, yes, it did. Yes, it did. Yeah, so they were made aware of that offering. And then the third question was,
did the scope for leisure centres include all the prior ones? But just coming back to it, the solar canopy, is that a responsibility of each supermarket, and will we be promoting that?
It's got on the community forum, I think, Councillor Jones.
Yeah.
Chair, if I can perhaps just help explain that one. So that's part of a really innovative and exciting project that we got with the City Council and sort of BP Chargemaster, who are a key partner of ours, and they've undertaken some studies and identified that Gamston it would be an excellent place for this solar canopy to be located, because in terms of people's travel arrangements. So they've done some studies around the borough in Greater Nottingham actually, and that's been identified, and it will be a first potentially for the county. And it will go in the car park at Gamston Community Hall, and so it will be, if you like, on our infrastructure, part of our sort of asset, if you like. And so it won't be it's not in Morrison's car park or anything like that. The problem we've got at the moment is the work that's needed to deliver it would interfere with the vaccination work. So, and clearly that is a significant and a very important task that we can't disrupt.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether it's possible to promote that with the various supermarkets, because as we know, the availability of charging points, there's a break point at which it encourages people to switch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is part of us hosting it, shall we say. It's about our leadership of place, and then encouraging other local businesses, such as other supermarkets and that, to jump on that as an excellent case study.
Yeah, if I can, Dave, just jump back in. He's on with Morrison's. I've actually been speaking to Morrison's, and they're very interested in putting electric car charging points in. They're just going through the process with head office and look at feasibility. So I know it's something they're interested in, and there are some at Audi I know nearby as well. So hopefully, like you say, more supermarkets jump on it. So that's great news. That was all the points? Was it Councillor Jones? I think the questions. So thank you. So to Councillor Walker, who was very gracious there. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and echo the comments of the other councillors about the clarity and detail in the report. So thanks for that, Emma. A few questions about me going one by one rather than list them all, and then maybe one of the things that I thought was very interesting was the graph you showed about the reduction since 2008.
Yes.
What do you know and can tell us about the causes of the reduction during that time?
It's generally to do with I think there's the buildings, the property has changed, so that's obviously impacted on that. Obviously, there's efficiencies. So you've already there's already been some sort of LED implementation. So that's obviously had an impact. And sort of there's general awareness around sort of carbon reduction, which is all sort of impacted on that. And sort of that's what's making the change. That's probably not quite clear, is it?
It was a bit. I thought it was a big change without trying much, I suppose. It seemed to be how I interpreted it.
I think, Chair, there's probably, if I could just jump in there. So there have been some significant changes, and obviously when members adopted the original carbon management plan, it was on the back of already a lot of good work, such as things like the move from the Civic Centre, which was a very sort of costly and large building, to heat. And use quite old technology, and also since then we've also moved from our depot into sharing at the City Council as well. So again, that was a very significant drafty old building to heat, and again that was another real positive win. So as always with these things, it's a quantum of all these measures all coming together and us keeping to working really hard to focus on you know, when we discussed this last year, we talked about what are the sort of big gains to be had, you know, the biggest bang for our buck. And as always, it's around, you know, gas, electricity in the leisure centres, that kind of thing. So working hard to reduce that, and indeed then looking at our own estate as the second, and then the third thing would be making sure that we're focusing in on our fleet as well. So they're sort of really, you know, the big areas.
Thank you for that, Dave, on that one. So back over to Councillor Walker. Do you have another question?
Yes, I do. Yeah, my other questions around this, understanding a bit more about this scope 3. So on one of the charts on the dashboard, the two of the three biggest ones at the moment are in relation to the externally managed leisure centres. I think one is gas, and I'm not quite sure what the kind of on the bit that I looked at, it kind of run out of space. I couldn't see what the third bar really is. So I suppose I've got a question about, with those being so big, what can we control there?
We've captured actions on the carbon management plan around that, and it's about working with the management team within there to carry out efficiency measures. So those bars that were on the graph were the gas and the electricity, but also within that we've also got captured fleet, the fuel for a streetwise fleet, and also business travel is within that scope 3 as well. So it's about working with those providers in terms of energy efficiency. With scope 3, it is very difficult to we can influence, but we can't directly control, which is why that falls under the scope 3, and which is why your carbon neutral commitment focuses on your scopes 1 and 2, because you directly control those. But that's not to say that you should forget about your scopes 3. And there's ways of looking at the contract, looking at KPIs within that contract, about delivering those efficiencies and working with them in terms of delivering efficiencies as well. Dave, I don't know if you want to sort of add anything into that.
Well, I think you've covered it very well, Emma. I think, as I say, we're sort of learning all the time about scope 3 and how we can control and influence that. And as I say, it's very much in our minds, you know, in terms of the you've mentioned already in the presentation about the specification for Bingham, and again building in, you know, carbon thinking within it, and clearly the new Bingham Leisure Centre will be an awfully a lot more sort of carbon efficient than the old sort of Toot Hill side.
Yeah, okay, thanks. The other thing about scope 3, and I would have had £5 with myself that Councillor Jones was going to mention this, is I wonder whether anything in relation to the council's activities in relation to planning and granting of planning applications is considered.
You've made his week there, absolutely.
Because clearly I would have thought, you know, starting from a position of complete ignorance, that the types of permissions that we give and the ways in which we do or don't control buildings that happen in our borough would be a really big factor in the calculations and something that we ought to be trying very hard to control.
That again has been captured in our carbon management plan in terms of working with the planners and looking at guidance, the supplementary planning guidance that's given to building contractors, and I know that is being looked at now. That's going to be a longer term goal. That's not going to be a short term win, because you need to develop these documents for the developers going forward. But that is something that's being captured in the carbon management plan.
I think, Chair, just to add to that, so as part section B of our carbon management plan is about that whole influencing piece, about how we can work with businesses, residents, and indeed use our sort of policy and regulation arrangements to influence others. We know that certainly from house builders, etc., it's a challenge because it's going to require a national change, and it's slowly starting to come to the fore now. But in terms of your question about whether or not those decisions would be captured within our Scope 3 emissions, Emma's sort of saying no, and I think it's pretty unlikely it would be, really, because it's rather different, if you like, to an officer travelling out to look at a development site, which is clearly part of the council's activities, and would be a Scope 3 potential emission, compared to something like, or indeed, where we're buying our paper from, this kind of stuff, printer inks, those sorts of things that we're looking to sort of dig into the detail on, as opposed to decision making, which is more about influencing.
Yeah, okay, that's thanks, Dave, on that one. Is that okay with yourself, Councillor Walker? No, great. Okay, so Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation, and echo that the dashboard looks brilliant and gives a clear indication on how the council is performing for us councillors and residents. I think my question is more like for the Scope 3 and the influence side of things. Just wanting to ask, like, kind of what work, or if any, to be done with with parish councils, and filtering it down and the messages through from that, with what we're trying to achieve with residents, and how as councillors can work with the local parish councils and like the West Bridgeford Forum for councillors there, working towards that, and also influencing as well. We've said about streetwise and potentially with the leisure sector with Lex Leisure and that, and the buildings there, but is there anything being done with like Metropolitan and the social housing and trying to make those more energy efficient and stuff like that? But then also another area of influence is because the borough is quite rural. We have a lot of fields and agriculture. Is there anything being done with that kind of scope? Because I think there is, like, the environmental bill's got a lot of changes in that, that the farming sector is going to have a look at. Is there anything there that the borough is looking and can influence as well? I understand that not all of those might not be able to, particularly agriculture, into the Scope 3, but of course, as part of the comms or stuff like that, with the industry being very rural as a borough. Thank you.
Are you happy for me to take that, Dave? Or
yeah, go for it.
So with regards to the parish councils, I've recently actually sent out an email to the more town councils and other groups, asking sort of what if they've declared a climate emergency, if they've got a carbon neutral target, just so I can get awareness of where they're coming from in terms of that. And then we, as I said in the presentation, I'm hoping to work with the parish. There's a conference in June, and then towards the end of the year. So I'll be presenting there and delivering a workshop and looking at ways of how they can reduce their own carbon footprint and perhaps align in some way to our own carbon commitment of 2030. becoming carbon neutral by 2030, and it's looking about delivering carbon literacy training to those groups as well, and we've got some potential funding that we'd be able to help support them with. With regards to Streetwise, just recently had a meeting with them, and I'm looking in the next couple of weeks at their environmental policy, and again sort of looking at ways in which we can work together in terms of looking at their alignment to our own carbon neutral ambitions as well. With regards to Metropolitan, that has been captured within the carbon management plan, and we will there has been some sort of connection with them at the moment, but we will be working with them going forward. I've obviously made connections with them with regard to the LAD 2 funding, because they can come on as a partner as well. And I'll be making connections with those as well in terms of making sure that the properties they have are as energy efficient as possible. And with regards to the rural, the farming, with regards to the Environment Bill, they kind of covers, I think there's 5 key areas. So you're talking waste and resource efficiencies, you're talking air quality, you're talking the biodiversity net gain, which is to do with planning, and water resource management. With regards to farming, I mean, we're obviously looking at all of our areas within the borough and enhancing those, because this is the way that we're going to offset our carbon emissions. So that again has been captured somewhat in the carbon management plan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. And Councillor Jones, knew you couldn't resist. Go on.
Well, I'd like to thank Councillor Walker for reminding me of my failings. As you'll know, I've many times commented that we're having, as a borough, many new homes built which are not fit for the future. And as Dave has obviously explained, that relies on the government creating the changes that it's deferred for several years in the building regulations in particular. So there's 2 things that strike me from that. One is the importance of the council encouraging the government to bring forward the building regulations that's been deferred. But secondly, when I raised with a bogus manager more than a decade ago about why they didn't build houses either solar ready or with solar panels on the top, in terms of the electrics for it, so that people could opt to have them on later. He said there was no demand for it. And I don't believe that. And I just wonder whether the council could produce something which potential buyers of new properties could ask house builders in terms of the environmental and ecological measures that they're building on their houses. In other words, the council encouraging consumers to ask the right questions.
Not sure if Dave, you want to comment first on that one, because more of a policy one overall.
Yeah, can do. Yeah, well, as always, we're happy to. We do continue to work through a number of government channels, working with MHCLG and other government reps to monitor, I guess, the speed and pace of change with national policy and legislation. And I think everyone's in the same position. All local authorities want to see this coming through, because it's going to be really important in terms of making sure that properties are fit for the future, as you say. So yeah, and we'll continue to have those conversations. I know Cabinet Portfolio Holder and indeed the leader as well have regular discussions about those topics with key officials and indeed local MPs as well. So there's a real push from the council to encourage that's happening, and in terms of encouraging buyers of new properties to ask the right questions, I guess, as to how carbon ready, if you like, their properties would be. Yeah, it's an interesting point. We can perhaps take that away and see how we can encourage that, perhaps under the Carbon Clever You've seen the Carbon Clever marketing brand, if you like, that we've got. Again, we're always looking for different angles and different opportunities to promote how we are encouraging people to think about carbon reduction in their everyday lives. And obviously buying a property is a big important step for anybody. So yeah, we'll take that action away. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Councillor Jones, for raising that one. Councillor Manor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, interesting. Councillor Jones said about that, and how there was no demand for that, and once there was demand, it was like, oh well, we can't afford it. They kind of, I do find that developers kind of work their way down their big book of excuses whenever something is proposed that they feel can't be added for whatever reason. A couple of people have mentioned the local area forum. Emma, I chair the local area forum. I will happily send you an invitation to come along at some point and talk to us if that's okay. It's yeah, be great. So we have a lot of community groups from West Bridgford are represented there, and I'm sure they'd love to hear about this and everything that's being done. There was another point I was just to ask about the wildflower things, because there have been some concerns where people have been given, and again, I'm hoping it's not here, where people have gone out with big packs of wildflower seeds, which they've planted after they've been out with the glyphosate and killed all the weeds, which were actually the wildflowers, just not the pretty ones. And so you've got some people have planted them, and you get these lovely blue cornflowers and all this kind of thing, and they look fantastic, but then they die off, and then they spray again with more glyphosate, kill everything off, and then plant some more of those. So as long as we're sort of giving the people instructions as to what to do, and not just to sort of go in there with a scorched earth policy just so they can have some pretty flowers. That has happened in places. So as long as we're giving people the right advice there, I think that would be something I'd like to see. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Manley. If it is something to go, I think it's a good point. I'm sure they've taken their way to speak to Paul, but it's about just to make sure, like you say, the instructions, some of us take it for granted, but I know if we're trying to get a lot more people involved, perhaps something around wildflower planting before, they might not realise this point she makes. It's very, very good to raise that. So I managed to meet myself there by accident. There you go. So thanks everyone for your contributions so far there. I mean, a few points for myself, Emma. I'll obviously let everyone else go first. So first of all, is the member for Gampton North, really looking forward to the canopy coming in place. I think that's going to be great to have up there. Like I say, the very busy car park there from people all over the boroughs. So I think it's going to be very much well used, the charging points there. In terms of, I think a point that was made earlier on, I think it was, I can't remember, it was now maybe Councillor Mann the first time around, about educating people around what they can do in terms of helping. There you go. See, I remember Richard. I don't remember you, but I think what we've got to do is go through in small steps. We don't want to scare everyone off by saying, you must buy an electric car tomorrow, otherwise you're horrible to the environment, because there are some people who that's out of reach at the moment. But things like, as Emma said, you said earlier about turning off light switches and turning off your monitors. I think actually that kind of education, especially around using social media channels and Russian reports, etc., to educate people to start with those small steps. We can build up gradually over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, well up to 2030 to get everyone to play their part. Because I think it is a good point that people may just assume we are doing everything for them, but there is a big part everyone can play. And it's about a mindset change. I remember 15 years ago in stores where we started having little stickers next to lights saying switch me off. Like, what the hell was all this about? But now it's, you do it naturally without the switch, without the sticker there to remind you to turn the light switch off at work or elsewhere. It's psyche. So I think that's all point we can try to push that along to encourage people to play their part. And I think for businesses as well, again, it's using that small steps. We obviously know how the COVID pandemic has affected all businesses, and most of them in a negative fashion in terms of the trade. So profits are going to be low and ability to invest may not be as high. But I think, again, just encouraging small steps to start with, what they can do will be great. And I know myself and David Bow, when we were talking to pre-meeting, the suggestion I put forward was a lot of businesses trying to take advantage of, the apprenticeship scheme and the apprenticeship levy to perhaps look at bringing people in who have got that mindset about what these businesses can do to help lower their carbon footprint, because I mean, that's, having that exclusive role, which again is going to be funded a lot through that levy, and again can be a partnership with partners like the county council with the scheme they're doing to be an umbrella organisation, and hopefully help bring new thinking to some businesses to look at the operations. And I think that's going to really encourage you to look at that going forward. So thank you everyone for your contribution so far, and I think that was a very extensive go over the brief. And Emma, thank you very much for your baptism of fire and putting up with us tonight. But as everyone has already said, it was a very excellent presentation, really detailed, and came across really well what you've been doing. I think in such a small amount of time, you've achieved a lot. So no pressure, but next year, our expectations are much higher now. So sorry about that. But and I really look forward to welcoming you back and in the progress you made. But in the items that council have asked for, if it's okay to pass it on to Democratic Services to feed out, I'm sure Helen and Laura will be able to put that out to all members, including ourselves as well, to review. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So go on to the recommendations then, which we've got two in front of us this evening. So the first one, A, is to consider and endorse the progress to date of the adopted carbon management action plan, and B is to make comment and contribute towards the emerging carbon management actions 2021-22. So of course for B, we've already, I think, all made comment and contributed, which is fantastic. So it's to consider and endorse the progress to date. So is anyone against that recommendation? If you could wave profusely or put your virtual hand up, that would be great. And I'm not seeing anyone against, so I'm taking that as a unanimous for recommendation A and B. So thank you very much everyone for that. So as we said before, that was the substantive item. On to the work programme. So what I just want to mention on here, it's not on there as such, but about the equality scheme, because obviously I know we brought that about twice and a lot of questions brought by the committee, rightly so. I chatted with the portfolio holder, meeting with portfolio holder and with Leanne to go through the feedback from our group and just to feed that in again and to make our points very much clear about what we would like to see come back in the equality scheme. And obviously we've got full buy-in from both Councillor Brennan, so I really appreciate Abby for her time and putting up with me on the call as well to put forward our points, and also to Leanne as well, really taking us points away, and to Sam from the East Midlands Council. So you may have seen, it was like 2, maybe 3 weeks ago now, where a consultation went out at the communication about asking people's feedback on actions, members of the public as well as councillors, which is great to see. And that the action plan itself is due to come to Cabinet. They will tell me differently. I think July was what we said. Was it July, Dave?
It's actually, Chair, it's next month.
Oh, there you go, next month. So you've got walk forwards just to give there. So that feedback has been taken forward with the plan, and of course once that plan has been in and if it is adopted by Cabinet and the council, we'll obviously look to bring that back in the future to scrutinise. So we're going with that. But I think the point I want to make is it really shows the process of scrutiny why we're here, because it'd be very much easier for us just to nod through a quality scheme and say we've done our job. But twice we went through it in a lot of detail, gave that feedback, and that has really been taken on board by the policy making part of the council. So it really just showed the role that scrutiny can play, and everyone here played a part in that. So thank you very much. So if we go now onto the work programme itself, so you might think it looks slightly light. It's because there's a lot of items still going through the corporate overview group, which of course myself, Councillor Bansal, sits on representatives from the group, and it's the running joke that about 90% of the items that come through are for our group. But I say we don't mind. We'll bring them all to us. We'll sort them out. So looking at the items at the moment, I'll pass over to Dave. Do you want to take us through that first of all? Before
Thank you, Chair. So we've got, for the first meeting in July, we've got the Safeguarding Adults and Children strategy, which is a corporate strategy that we've got, which will detail how we fulfil our roles and obligations to in safeguarding those particular elements. We've then got in October a review of police performance and resources for Rushcliffe. It sort of builds on similar presentations that we've had in the past, which link through to our community safety partnership role and our close collaborative working with the police. And so there'll be again a short report and presentation around that in October. And then looking ahead then into January, we've got the housing delivery plan. Again, that's an existing policy the councils, which needs to be refreshed, but it's a very important document. So colleagues will be bringing that forward for your comments and feedback before finally shaping that and taking that through to Cabinet. And then over the page in April 2022, in a year's time, we'll have obviously the carbon management plan back again, as we have tonight. And members will be aware that we've already talked about the Environment Bill tonight. It's moving sort of, well, something that's been described as glacial speed through at the moment, and we all want to see it, come through as quickly as possible for it to be able to be brought to bear. But the waste strategy update will be an important element of that, because it's going to be bringing in some key changes for things like food waste potentially. A national consistent scheme for dry recycling, a deposit return scheme, etc., etc. So a number of key changes there in the offing, and we hope to have more detail to shape our own waste strategy by next April. But as the chairman has said, there are a number of other particular topics that are currently sitting on a scrutiny matrix table, again, which will further populate this work programme going forwards.
Thank you much, Dave. So any questions on the work programme itself from anyone? You can raise your hand. No, that's okay. So I said there as well, that some of those items may change depending on the current circumstances where the council is currently at, but of course, so keep you informed the best we can on that one. And same as what we said, the scrutiny matrix, if anyone's put items through, I know many of you in the group have. I have on a few occasions, it's great to see them come through, like the police performance one, for example. And like I say, if you want to handle, want to discuss at any point, please let me know so we can look to support that in the corporate overview group going forwards. So thank you. So I will take that as everyone's in favour of the work programme, as there was no objections against. So unless you are objecting to that, you can raise your hand profusely again or throw things at the screen as you're throwing at me. No, that was a one-time invitation. So thank you very much for your agreement with that. So that's the end of the meeting. So I say thank you everyone for your participation as always. So I look forward to seeing you in person, as we say, at our next meeting as it currently stands. The details for how the meeting will run will obviously come out to you in advance. The changes only happened very recently, as of today, I believe. So of course the council just needs to go through and to make sure all process can be put in place to make sure everyone is safe and that we can run the meeting effectively. So be in contact nearer time to discuss how we're going to have that happen next. So to our 10 million followers on YouTube, really apologise for that. You're more than welcome to come in person. We may have to hire the Forest Stadium to start with, but you never know to have you there. But thank you very much once again, and look forward to seeing you all soon.